All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. Thanks for joining today's webinar organized by Airbus in collaboration with Terrawatch. We have quite an interesting agenda today, and we're going to be focusing on the use of Earth observation, satellite imagery across, at least 3 use cases you're going to hear from the speakers, especially focusing on how Airbus's satellite imagery that spans across different sensors and resolutions is useful for those applications. We're going to get started now. We're waiting for people to come in. I see people coming in, so I think we'll just get started. The agenda that we have today is, the speakers will introduce themselves, and then we'll get into a few overviews of each of the speakers here, starting from Airbus, and then SkyWatch, Intelinair, and 3V Geomatics. I'll let the speakers introduce themselves and their companies in a bit. And then we have some questions that we've prepared for the speakers. And then towards the 45-minute mark, you'll have opportunity to ask your questions. So you'll see a Q&A box down on the right. Please start, putting in your questions already from the get-go if you want, or during the course of the presentation. But we'll pick up the questions at 45-minute mark for Q&A. Until then, we have the agenda prepared here. So let's get to introductions. Maybe I'll start myself. My name is Arvind. I'm the founder of Terrawatch Space. It's an advisory firm, advisory and communications firm focused on Earth observation. I am based in France, but I work with clients around the world. I've been in Earth observation for the last 6 years, and I also write the Terrawatch Space newsletter and host the Terrawatch Space podcast. So that's quickly about me. I'll go quickly around the set of speakers. Maybe we'll start with Jesse. Do you want to introduce yourself, Jesse?
Yep. Hi, I'm Jessie Dick. I am the head of marketing for the Airbus Intelligence Division here in North America.
Brilliant. Let's go to John. John, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, John Layton here at 3V Geomatics in Vancouver. Been doing INSAR for about 20 years. Including 11 at 3VG, and prior to that I was a lecturer at the University of Nottingham. Before that, I was an army surveyor for 15 years.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. Alison, do you want to go next?
Yeah, great. My name is Allison. I'm a senior data scientist at SkyWatch. I've only been in the Earth observation realm for over a year now, although prior to this, I have a background in e-commerce, and I'm trained as an astronomer and astrophysicist. So bringing space data via these platforms is I've been well set up for.
Awesome. Last but not least, Kevin.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Kevin Krieg, I'm the Business Development Director with Intelinair, and I'm representing the ag industry. And so really my background, grew up on a farm, had been involved in ag really all of my life. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you how we're using Earth observation information to help farmers and retailers be able to help feed the planet with what we're doing.
Brilliant. Now the intros are out of the way. We'll get started with the webinar, but yeah, once again, for the Q&A, start putting in your questions into the Q&A box. We'll go into some presentations. So all the speakers here will give a small presentation around 3 to 5 minutes each on telling more about their company and talking more about their verticals they're working on, because obviously we have speakers from different industries here. So let's start with Jesse, who's going to provide an overview of Airbus. Pretty sure quite a few people here know about the capabilities and the offerings of Airbus, but I'll leave it to you, Jesse, to give an overview.
Yep, thanks very much. So Airbus, I think people still associate Airbus mainly with airplanes, but we are the intelligence division of Airbus with over 35 years of experience focused on collecting, processing, and delivering top quality Earth observation satellite imagery data and products. We also do a lot of other imagery services and other products like elevation data, ground control points, things like that. We also have many important defense systems and solutions mainly used abroad. But today we're going to focus on the imagery side of things and obviously the applications involved with that. So as we all know, no single data source can answer every question, which is why we offer a range of different satellite imagery products. You know, the lower end products that have large coverage, lower resolution, low accuracy, low price, all the way up to our top of the line product, and really the top of the line product on the market as far as resolution and accuracy, our Pleiades Neo 30 centimeter data. Also still at a very reasonable price, I must say. So yeah, depending on your application, your budget, we have a range of options for you to choose from. And we've always focused on, you know, delivering top quality products with, you know, good accuracy, reliability, and we want to make them as accessible as possible. So if you move to the next slide, making that data as accessible as possible is really the core of our One Atlas platform. So within the One Atlas platform, you can access all of our data services, all of our optical imagery, our radar imagery, even our elevation and 3D imagery. You can access archive data and satellite tasking. We were the first many years ago to offer archive data for purchase online, and we also were the first to offer our customers the joystick to our satellites. You can essentially directly task our satellites from your desktop. So it is really that simple these days. And we also make everything available via the web UI you see here on the screen, as well as various APIs that we have. You can stream and download the data as you want, and you can also purchase it as you want, whether it's a subscription service or a pay-per-order option. We try to be as flexible as possible, depending on what you need. We have a lot of options available to you. Next slide, Rebecca. And then all of that imagery, what's it good for? It's good for getting answers to a lot of questions and a lot of the markets you see here. So we serve up a lot of these markets directly with our data, but we also work with a lot of great partners, like 3 of which you'll hear from today. You know, with the range of products that we have, it helps feed great marketplaces like SkyWatch's marketplace, and it also really gets down to the nitty-gritty of the specific applications that you'll hear about from 3V and Intelinair. So with that, I'll hand the ball over. Enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jessie. All right, let's move to the first speaker from Airbus's partners. We'll hear from SkyWatch. So I'll pass it over to you, Alison.
Thanks, Arifin. For those of you who aren't aware of what SkyWatch is or what we do, we act as a marketplace connecting providers to end consumers. So with a single access point for Earth observation data. We enable our customers to acquire this data from a number of providers via a single access point from the demand side, which is Earth cache. And we offer multiple types of data and data sources, which allow our customers to procure the data that they need that best suits their needs. And also hosting multiple kinds of data is that customers will often use these complementary data types for one use case. For an example is open source low resolution data and very high resolution data for Airbus in a tipping queue fashion. So Earth cache provides access to satellites and non-satellite remote sensing data, a streamlined procurement for Earth observation data. It's really, Jessie was talking to accessibility, and really the goal is to make this data accessible to everyone. We also have a native integration with Esri ArcGIS, as well as an API to enable power users, as well as the casual user from our front end to access our data. And in the next slide, and who are the types of people that we see participating in kind of our ecosystem on the partner and customer side. So we have many partners, including Airbus, that are indicated in that box on that slide. And in terms of the people that are accessing this data, it's really a diverse set of folks. So we have everything from individuals, academic institutions, news sources, small companies, publicly traded companies, across a variety of expertise. Although we find that our platform is best suited for engineering and construction, manufacturing, mining, oil and gas, as well as utilities. And in many of these industries, we see common asset management, commercial intelligence, critical infrastructure monitoring, risk identification and mitigation. And we do this through like change detection and object detection. But the applications are endless and the users are endless, and we're really seeing that marketplace emerge. And I'll toss it back to you, Erwin.
All right, brilliant. Now let's move on to Kevin from Intelinair, or rather it's going to be John.
Yeah. Let me start by introducing 3VG as one of a group of companies that sit under an umbrella called Terra Insight. So we are co-owned by these guys, and our common theme is geotechnical monitoring. So that's everything from traditional type geotechnical instruments, piezometers, extensometers, mines, and so forth, shape arrays, satellite INSAR, which is our piece, seismic monitoring, and GNSS, and then also a visualization platform. So we try to be a one-stop shop that, you know, we haven't been together for too long, but we're trying to build something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. For INSAR, well, next slide, please, actually. Let me explain what INSAR is. Interferometric synthetic aperture radar, which is a bit of a mouthful. The synthetic aperture radar piece is Airbus. That's the data source, that's the satellite. In their case, TerraSAR-X, which is really the workhorse of geotechnical monitoring, which is acquiring data for us over areas that we task usually every 11 days, but it can go more frequently. So on the left here, you can see two images acquired at different times, 11 days apart. And during that time, point B has displaced a little bit. The path length to B has increased. And so we can compare B with B over time, but we can also, just as importantly, compare A with B. So we're kind of doing a difference in time and a difference spatially. And really the crux of the matter is to remove all of the other stuff that you don't care about. So in amongst the displacement, there's many other things in the data which you can model and filter away. And once you do that, you can map ground displacement to millimeter precision over huge areas. And most people will do this to manage their risks. And I would say that the real strengths of satellite INSAR are early warning due to its precision, its wide coverage, and then, yes, it's high precision. Next slide, please. So let's talk about a few applications. About 15 years ago, I guess, commercial INSAR kind of kicked off with the oil and gas industry. Here you can see the San Joaquin oil field in California. Lots of displacement, huge arid area, not much vegetation. Vegetation is not the friend of INSAR, but plenty of displacement here. And these guys are mainly kind of tuning models for production. They're not really managing risk. Next. And then more commonly nowadays, pipeline and mining monitoring have really driven the industry forward. We have much more sophisticated products which are attributed for them, and displacement detection algorithms based on the signal to noise. How high is that signal compared to the background noise? And these guys are managing risks and detecting failures, hopefully well in advance. Even if they know the failure is going to happen, still they can often mitigate, but often you can prevent failures from happening altogether. Next. And then finally, a couple of urban examples. On the left, the Sydney Metro Tunnel. You can see it's the sort of where the Sydney Tunnel is underground. And this color map is only plus or minus 3 millimeters. So we're detecting very precise, very small amounts of displacement here. And the city provides an idealized environment, lots of hard targets that don't change much, really can increase the precision. And on the right there, this is an example of a legal case. The Millennium Tower in San Francisco was known to be leaning, and a class action lawsuit, which we were pulled into, tried to quantify that with an more than 10-year data set of TerraSAR-X from Airbus. And because we had more than one perspective, we were also able to derive information about the direction of the displacement. So you can see it moving south and west here over that decade. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that was very interesting, and I'm sure some listeners here probably got to learn about INSAR and probably have one or two questions. And yeah, if someone in the audience have questions, yeah, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box. And yeah, last but not least, let's move to Kevin from Intelinair for your presentation.
Yes, thank you. So Intelinair is a company that uses artificial intelligence, machine learning through a lot of the remote sense data that we get to deliver automated crop intelligence to our customers. And those customers are ag retailers, farmers, input companies, really anybody in the production of agricultural outputs. And we do that to help them increase their productivity and sustainability of their farm by using this technology and the analytics that we develop. So we're headquartered out of Indianapolis, Indiana, really right as part of the corn belt that we're in, but we serve primarily corn and soybeans is where we've delivered a lot of our analytics for. We serve those across about 4,000 different grower customers. And we've been predominantly in the Midwest in the US, but now with the partnership with Airbus, we've had the ability to expand into Canada, Brazil, Kenya, and India as well. So that's one of the exciting things for us as a company is to be able to leverage our technology across a broader geography that we have. So then the next slide talks a little bit about what is the product and what we do. So really, again, I mean, it's through a product called Ag MRI, and it is a management decision-making tool that helps them around field insights and alerts. So what's happening on their fields, and then we have a full range field scouting platform as well, and then data analytics as far as how that field responded throughout the year, how did it perform, what were the factors that led to what it did throughout that season. And then one of the key things for sustainability is around managing the nitrogen. So we have a full nitrogen management tool. And we deliver those things through a web-based application and along with mobile apps that allow them to where our customers are at, which is typically then out in the field or working with the customers. The right graphic then shows you at a high level of really what is the use case that we enable for our customers throughout the crop season, throughout when the crops are growing. And it starts at the top. And this is really where the Airbus Pleiades data comes in for us, where it helps us monitor all of the fields. So we can look across all of those acres that rag retailer has for their customers. We can monitor that. And then through our analytics, we've developed ways to be able to find issues with crop health, with disease, with the emergence of the plants, lots of different things we can alert on. And then through that, we can filter down to which fields need attention to be able to have some sort of corrective action made. So then that can kick off an investigation or a scouting event out in the field. And then the platform really allows a lot of collaboration between that ag retailer and the farmer to be able to look at the options, look at what they found, and then, you know, make a decision on what to do with that field. And then from that decision, they can either, you know, elect to, you know, to not spend the money on it, or to investigate other things going forward, or keep an eye on it, or they can actually take action, which involves machines out in the field, applying products to that field to be able to address it. And then really this loop starts over again each time we capture more data, and we're monitoring what has happened based off that action to be able to help make sure they're getting the most out of their fields in the most sustainable way possible. So that's a quick look at what Intelinair does and our Ag MRI product, and how Airbus helps us do that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. That was very interesting, and it's nice to have a diversity of applications being discussed. We'll now move on to some questions that we have prepared. And let's start with Alison. So I wanted to ask, as a marketplace, you know, obviously you'll see demand for satellite imagery across different sectors. So I was curious if you're seeing demand some, you know, specific areas. Are there, you know, use cases that come up a lot? Do you have some examples of those use cases?
Yeah, for sure. So we see a lot of applications in engineering and construction, oil and gas, mining, manufacturing, and utilities, as I had alluded to before, and in particular asset monitoring. So for instance, if somebody's building a new factory or a new center, to be able to monitor that construction as it goes along. There's also change detection. So for pipeline monitoring, we'll see a lot of companies also use like a tip and queue system, where they'll use lower resolution data, which tends to be cheaper. They'll find pixels have changed, but they don't quite know what's going on in those pixels, where they'll then use higher resolution data in many of these things. So we also assist oil and gas organizations comply with site remediation as they manage wellheads. As I mentioned, manufacturing companies monitor their inventory levels and identify potential theft and ensure efficient resource allocation for those materials. So especially if they're being held in very large areas. And we're continuing to play a larger and more active role assisting organizations as they build out their overall strategies, whether it's monitoring impact and activities on surrounding environment, or anything from counting trees to offset carbon emission. So there's quite a few things, but mostly monitoring related.
All right, yeah, very interesting. I'm obviously using, you know, demand across different use cases, but you mentioned, you know, monitoring being the key component, and obviously satellite imagery plays a, you know, big role there. Moving on to John. You know, you talked obviously about INSAR. That was a quick overview. I'm sure you can also do like 45 minutes on it if you want. But I was curious: are there specific applications of INSAR that is the most interesting or the most exciting of those that you already offer, and what is the role of satellite imagery in that?
Yeah, thanks. Our biggest sector actually is mining. It's probably about 70 to 80% of not just from 3VG, but the industry. And, you know, when we started out with mining, I was skeptical that it would work at all, because radar data and INSAR it's somewhat finicky in that there is often a requirement. Traditionally, there's a requirement for targets to persist over time. So if you have a boulder in a mine, for instance, it provides a good target for monitoring. But if then one day it's not there, it rolls away or it's mined or something else takes its place, and the traditional forms of INSAR were not good at handling that kind of change. So small changes INSAR's good at, but the larger changes not so much. So something we've spent a lot of R&D time on is being able to handle those gaps in the data. So targets can come and go now as they please in a mining environment, and if you measure these non-persistent objects as well as the persistent objects, you can increase your coverage by maybe 100%. You know, it's that different. And if you don't do that, you are discarding huge amounts of information. So we're pretty happy with the way it's turned out.
Brilliant. Thanks for the response. A question to Kevin. You coming in from the agriculture sector, what does the current landscape look like in precision ag today? What are some of the top trends you're seeing with respect to the use of satellite imagery?
Yep. Yeah. So regarding the landscape, I mean, one of the biggest things out there that's driving our business really is that farms are getting larger and the equipment is getting more technology advanced in it, right? So there's a lot more that it can do. And typically the decision maker that would be making the decisions for the farm of what, products to use, how to address different things, they're not in the cab of these machines anymore. So they're not out there seeing it close up of what's happening across all of their acres as well. So that's one of the main challenges there. Then on the ag retail side, ag retailers across the US, but across the world really, for wherever we go to talk to our customers and the retailers, they're having a hard time finding, the people that come from a farm background, have that deep agricultural knowledge, as well as having the ability to, build that relationship with their customers. So there's just not as many people in ag, so not as many are going into ag as a career, and so it's harder to attract them. One of the other things that's driving a lot of the precision ag side of the business as well is the fact that input costs are very high. So the cost to produce a crop is as high as it's really ever been per acre. And there's lots of new products that are coming to the market that can help them get a good output. But when is the right time to spend the money on those inputs? And when is one better than the other as well? And then to top all that off, really, the weather patterns are a little bit more erratic now, and those change and those have a big impact on the crop throughout the year. So that's kind of where the landscape is at for precision ag. Then specifically about where satellite imagery is coming in is that, one of the things is really bringing it in to the main workflow of the farm management information system. So the things that have been around there for years as far as logging data about what happens on that field, coupling that with the remote sense stuff and the analytics that we can provide, helps unlock more value to those farmers and those customers, and gives those retailers the knowledge to have a great conversation with their customers on what's happening on their farm. And then probably one of the other emerging trends that we're seeing that really is going to drive a lot of the remote sense data as well is with the more autonomy, more things that are coming with the machines to be able to go out there. And matter of fact, I just saw the first, spray drone got approval to be able to really fly unmanned and go apply pesticides, herbicides, whatever it is, the field's coming up. The first one's been approved in the US. Well, that's going to drive a lot of this remote sensing to understand what's happening out in all of the different fields, then to know then where to go to apply those products and where to deploy those machines to. Those are, multi-million-dollar machines on some of them. And so being able to scout the fields and know where to deploy them at the right time is going to be critical. So that's how satellite imagery is going to help that in the future.
Right, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. I think that was kind of very interesting presentations from all three of you coming in from different angles. I have one question, same question to all of you, which is focused on Airbus and the satellite imagery coming from Airbus satellites. So what is the Airbus satellite imagery bring to the table specifically for the applications that you're developing? I think from Allison's perspective, is it more? It's more about, how does the imagery from Airbus kind of is positioned on the marketplace, because you already have several data sources. So maybe I'll start with you to talk about where the difference is, or what the differentiation is for Airbus's imagery.
Yeah, of course. And as Jesse had explained at the beginning, the Pleiades Neo, the 30 centimeter resolution product, is some of the highest resolution data on the market, and it's the highest resolution data we offer from satellites on SkyWatch. And we have particular interest in that product, and it really drives Airbus demand. And when we talk about accessibility of Earth observation data, when you think about like the early adopters of the data to drive insights, it can sometimes be a little bit complicated, because Earth observation data can be complicated, as you see from 3VG and Intelinair really like distilling that information to provide value. What's really nice about something like the Pleiades Neo offering is, for those who aren't experts and who don't have a background in a lot of this, there's a lot of what you see is what you get in kind of that information. So I was talking to one of our sales folks last week, and she was mentioning how these enterprise users, to be able to even just like count solar panels, to be able to have the resolution to do that, to be able to see it is very helpful, and that they can extract value almost immediately without having any kind of expertise in Earth observation. And then some common applications that we have for this VHR I alluded to earlier is this tip and cue, which happens a lot for the infrastructure monitoring and risk mitigation applications. And that's using the lower resolution data to queue for change detection, and then to bring in the high resolution data, the very high resolution data from Airbus, again, to be able to see it's like what actually happened in those instances. There's also like the consistency and reliability, capacity, the accuracy of geolocation, the high revisit rate, the high fulfillment, all make the Airbus offering really crucial to a lot of our customers' success.
Brilliant, thanks, Allison. John, I'm going to go to you. So what does imagery from Airbus bring to the table? Obviously, you talk about INSAR and its applications across different use cases, but what does the imagery from Airbus bring to the table?
Yeah, I think reliability and redundancy are key here. So if you compare it to other satellites, because in terms of precision and resolution, it's kind of on par with many other satellites. But if I, for instance, wanted to monitor some area that didn't suit TerraSAR-X, I had to go to another data source. I might only get maybe 10 images in an entire year. But for TerraSAR-X, it's just it's so reliable. We have a site in South America, for instance, where we collect 128 images a year. So we have 4 different footprints. So we're crying from different directions. We can solve for some direction of displacement because we have all that redundancy. And we fulfill regulations. So the client might have regulations that require them to monitor over a certain frequency. And if we can't do that, if we can't fulfill that, then then it's not much more than a trial. And I had another point, but I can't remember what it was. Maybe it'll come to me.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you. In the meantime, so Kevin, you talked about the use of satellite imagery, and you kind of touched on it before, but I wanted to ask, so what does imagery from Airbus bring to the table for you?
Yeah, for us, really, we use the half meter data as our primary data source, even though we'll use the meter and a half and the 0.3 meter, 30 centimeter stuff as well. But really, what it brings for us is, so when you think of our primary crops of corn and soybeans, right? They're really it's about 4 months from planting to that crop is fully mature and, you know, ready to be harvested. So, and the first couple months are really the critical times to make sure that crop has everything it needs to really produce a great yield for the end farmer. So one of the things with that we like about Airbus is that resolution, be able to pick up that crop vegetation through the NDVI that we get, to be able to see that early enough in the year to be able to take action on that. So one of our main differentiators that we have is really focused on that early season crop health, to really be able to give those retailers and farmers the ability to do that collaboration that we talked about and work together and adjust based on what the weather's given them, how the crops responded to that, to what they can do to get the best output. And so really one kind of, you know, concrete example of that is that, you know, corn at V6, you know, one of the main management practices they would do their last herbicide application at V6, which that corn is about, you know, a foot tall at that point. And so us being able to measure that before that and understand where that crop health is at, where that variability is across the field, gives them the opportunity to be able to, you know, mix in different products or address things at that herbicide application that they're already going to the field to do. So it allows them to be able to, without incurring more cost of being able to send equipment out there and doing, you know, another application later in the year, or doing another product at that point, it allows them to be able to do it at that time and really reduce their cost of input at that. So that's one of the critical things that the Airbus imagery brings us, is that high resolution for early season detection as well. But then it's even, you know, just the stuff of being able to see how those plants are responding that the human eye can't see. So we can really then be able to detect those issues in the field and then get that corrective action put in place before it's a problem across the wider area for that farmer or that retailer. So that's the beauty of it to us.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. We're going to move on to Q&A in a couple of minutes, but before that, one last question to all of you. And I think all of you touched on it in your responses. But I want to ask, so specifically, what is the most important characteristic about satellite imagery from Airbus? Is it the reliability, resolution, quality, accuracy? Because I think all of you have mentioned this, you know, everywhere. So I just wanted to ask, you know, what would be the most important characteristic for you? And we'll start with Alison again.
Yeah, so as touched upon before, resolution is definitely very important for our customers. But I think it was like our head of sales who used the word customers are also delighted by the latency, the idea that you can order an image and just have it returned to you so fast, which I just think comes from like the general coverage as well as the revisit rate that Airbus offers.
All right, brilliant. John, how about yourself?
Yeah, no single element. You know, we talked about reliability, or without reliability, we really have nothing. If we have low resolution, there are still applications we can do. For instance, if you're monitoring wide displacement, then maybe low resolution could work. But if you've got a dam that's 10 meters wide, that's 3 pixels for TerraSAR X. If you've got a 20 meter pixel, that's not even a 1 pixel, right? So you need that resolution if you want to detect small areas of displacement. And small areas of displacement normally means you can detect those risks earlier because you're kind of nearer the beginning, if you like. And then, yeah, just Alison makes a good point about latency. That is really key for these people who are regulated to monitor data latency. If I've got an image and it's a week old, then it's just way less useful to them. I need that data quickly, and you know, Airbus are great at that. We have many clients where we guarantee a report within 24 hours. So we need to get that data down here, process it, and there's a significant amount of processing, and then get the report to them.
All right, sounds good. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think Allison and John hit on a lot of it as well, right? I mean, for us, it's all of it, right? But that resolution is really, I would say, the driving factor, but then the reliability, and as John mentioned, the timing, right? Same thing in ag, right? I mean, if we're a day or two later from when we've got that image to when it's processed and available to them, that's very, with the tight windows that our farmers operate in, that's just, it's critical to be able to get that data to us, process fast, and get it back out to our customers through the system. So I think that reliability is key. And then, I mean, just the quality of the images is unbelievable, right? So, I mean, we use it on our family farm, and the first image I saw last year, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was about right at a little over a year, or not quite a year ago. And I mean, my dad was out planting a field, and I pulled that field up. The first image I looked at, you can see the marks that the planter and tractor are leaving in the field. So every detail then is available for them to use to be able to understand what is happening on that farm. So, I mean, it's impressive, the quality of that image that's coming through the Airbus system, to be able to apply it to ag and to be able to capture those, macro trends across the field, but then also use that detail to understand what is driving those things. So it's really, I mean, it's the resolution is huge, but the quality and reliability are also key for us being able to deliver and do what we do.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. All right, so it's time to move on to the Q&A. I'm going to look at the Q&A box. I know that a couple of people had their questions in the chat box, but yeah, if you have more questions, just enter it on the Q&A box, which is next to the chat box. I'm going to start with the questions just based on the votes, just to make it easier to start. And I think the first question is about INSAR, so I'm guessing it's for you, John. So I think the question's about, I don't know if you mentioned vegetation is not a friend of INSAR, and the question's about, does it mean that there aren't any nature-based applications for INSAR?
No, actually there are. So TerraSAR X, the X stands for X band. So these are short wavelengths, easily scattered by vegetation. And as important as vegetation is actually moisture on the ground. So that affects the way it reflects. But if you use a longer wavelength, so L band, then you can kind of fight your way through this vegetation, and it's analogous to if somebody is playing music next door through the wall, all you hear is those bass sounds, right? You don't hear the violins. So that TerraSAR X is the violins. What we need is that bass drum. So we're waiting for TerraSAR L to come along, and there have been rumors in the past, but right now we're using Japanese source for the data, which is unfortunately not as reliable. Takes about a week to get to us, that kind of thing. But there are missions coming up with more L-band sensors, and for those we'll be able to monitor pipelines. We're monitoring many pipelines now using the Japanese data, but there's a long way to go. There's a lot of L-band satellites that are planned that are going to really revolutionize monitoring in the vegetated space. I should mention that the trade-off for this kind of satellite, because you might well ask, well, why not just use L-band all the time, because it can do it all? But you trade off some precision. So with TerraSAR X imagery, we can drill down to the millimeter level in a city, for instance. But an L-band satellite would be a few centimeters, 3 to 4 centimeters. It's kind of the noise floor, so much higher than an X-band satellite like TerraSAR X.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, John. Next question. I think this is more a question for everybody. So if anyone wants to take it, just come forward. The question is, how do downstream observation businesses deal with the risk associated with availability of satellite data and if a satellite stops working or your request is not a priority for the satellite company? I think maybe Alison, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I can start with this one. So one of the ways, it might sound like a bit of a shameless plug, but I think there is real value there, that EO businesses can deal with these risks. Coming through SkyWatch as an application, especially if you're a smaller business, being able to use SkyWatch's collective purchasing power gives us higher priority with some of our partners. So that will ensure that you have higher priority. So like a platform such as ours is useful for that, as well as having the multiple providers available. But there are also always risks associated. I mean, if you're looking at optical imagery, clouds happen. So being able to be flexible in your request, or if you can't, then there are other output types that you can try for, like SAR being resistant to something like this. But I'll leave the floor open for others as well.
Yeah. Kevin, do you want to add? Yeah. Oh, sorry, go on. Justin.
I can add a little bit. Just, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, we primarily focus on the half-meter data, right? But we also, you know, look and do the spot and 1.5 meter stuff, depending on the time of year and the latest, the NEO. We're, you know, using that as somewhat as well. So, kind of having those three options, and then plus what SkyWatch offers, right, gives us that ability to go, you know, and get more of that data in. Depending on that, but we've seen, you know, good reliability with getting the Airbus data in at the time frames we need to be able to run our business.
Brilliant. Jesse, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just essentially going to say the same thing. We diversify our constellation for that very reason, right? So that if something were to happen to one satellite, or we have a huge amount of people requesting data over one area, that we can manage the various resources. And we have, you know, 35 years of experience doing this. We're very good at making sure we use everything the right way to get you what you need. So it's not really a big problem.
Yeah, for radar, you know, traditionally there's been fewer sources of data, but they're kind of catching up. So TerraSAR X is actually a constellation of 3 satellites. There is 2 original German satellites, and then a Spanish satellite which was added after, which is a clone. And we can use all of these together. So there is that redundancy there, and I think, you know, the German Space Agency have definitely got some magic sauce, because they can build satellites that seem to last for 10 years longer than some of their counterparts. So yeah, redundancy in satellites. More and more we're moving towards constellations, smaller satellites, launching many at a time. Not so much the paradigm of must not fail, crucial single satellite launches, but should not fail, but if they do, we have spares.
All right, thank you. I hope that answered your question, Aditya. Question from Kevin. Gonna read out the question from Kevin. So it's about digital elevation models, and I think Kevin's talking about, Alison, you mentioned latency. So his question's about, you know, the most accurate digital elevation model is Copernicus DEM, but its latency is every 10 years. So his question is, do you have ideas, or do you already offer low latency DEMs? Maybe Jesse, you want to take that, or?
Yeah, sure. So we have probably actually the highest resolution global digital elevation model, and that's our World DEM NEO product. It's 5 meter resolution, and all of that data has been collected in the last 5 years or so. So it's new, it's perfectly good resolution, and it's truly global, homogeneous, seamless data. And then we also can do various DEM products on the fly. So using our optical data or radar data, we can create digital elevation models on demand. Obviously, we can't create the globe every year or every day, but we can certainly create them over specific areas very quickly and as often as you need.
Brilliant. Next question is from Brenner, and it's about SAR and SAR for cities. So could you list some requirements for applying SAR data in urban development applications? And he'd like to integrate SAR data for monitoring infrastructure change in urban environment. He's asking where to start. I guess, Jesse, maybe you want to start, or maybe Alison, I don't know. Maybe Jesse, you can start, and then Alison can add something.
I will say I'm not a SAR expert, so if Alison has something to add, or John, I welcome it.
Sorry, I saw John unmuted. I'm also not.
Alison.
I would say I'm also not a SAR expert, but I do know our company contains a couple of SAR experts, and I would refer you to our website and to our account manager folks for that. But in terms of the direct integration, I believe that John might be the best option for that expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the question means in terms of listing requirements. But you can do change detection with SAR data. There's kind of two types of change detection. There is detecting changes in the brightness, which we call the amplitude, and you can also detect changes in the coherence. So the coherence is the pairs of images. When we do INSAR, we do it with pairs of images. When you look at the brightness, you're looking at single images. So both of these things have good contrast, if you like, for changes. And there are applications now looking at leaking spigots, for instance, people that claim they can do this at least. Because you can also actually use the polarization of the data to say something more, because then you have your amplitude from different polarizations. So it's something we are working on and building into our products as a value added thing, but it's not our core business. Lots of people do it from regularly acquired SAR data. I wouldn't, in terms of requirements for applying SAR data, I mean, an urban environment is ideal. I think I would just, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think, yeah, Brenner, I think you got some answer to your question, I suppose. But yeah, just to add on, yeah, you can probably find a lot of information on their websites in terms of how to get started with the requirement. Sorry, with the application, and maybe just contact the companies respectively to get more detailed answers. Moving on to another question. I think I'm going to look, which is probably going to be another one from Brent. Does any of your companies compile SAR data for flood monitoring across broad geographies? I think you have SAR data, right, Jesse, on your platform, and I'm sure SkyWatch also has that, correct? I don't know what broad geographies mean, but I think you have a collection of SAR data on your platforms, respective platforms, I suppose, right, Jesse?
Yeah, we have both archive data and obviously the tasking capabilities to get new data. So we have a whole radar platform where you can go and order that data very easily.
All right. I think that's answered. I am going to go to the next question. Another one from Brenner. Where can I get demo data? Example, stereo, pair of optical. In most cases, I need to process the data in-house and develop applications close to the end user. Do you offer demo data free of charge?
So on the Airbus website, absolutely, we have a whole set of sample data you can download over various areas. If none of those areas suit your needs, you need a demo product over a specific area, just contact us. We're very flexible with that. So small areas, not a huge countrywide area or anything, but yeah, happy to provide demo data as needed.
All right. I think that is good. I think I've seen some of you have answered questions directly there. That's great. One question for Alison. So what kind of distribution of satellite data do you see being used true color, NDMI, NDVI, etc.?
Yeah, so the data scientist in me is already going. It's like, what do you mean by like amount of data? Because you can go by area, information density, price. But to try to best answer that question, so we see most of the demand, especially when you're looking at like asset monitoring and change detection. We have folks using all optical bands or all optical bands plus the near infrared. But we also see folks using the indexed images that were alluded to, the NDVI and the NDVI too, but mostly we see in the optical and the near infrared.
All right, thank you. Probably we have time for a couple more questions. So if you have any questions, just drop it. I think we can take one more. In the meantime, I think there was a question related to digital terrain models. I think it's probably for you, Jesse. What was the resolution from Astrid? What was the resolution in meters?
For digital terrain models, we have different resolutions we can offer, again, based on which sensor you use, what your need is. So there's a range.
Okay, yeah, I recommend contacting them directly, Astrid. I think we've gone through most of the questions. I will have one last question then that is more, providing an overview. So what is your outlook for the use of satellite imagery within your industry? And what kind of challenges is it going to help solve? Maybe I'll, go over all the three speakers. If we have last questions, I can ask. But in the meantime, John, do you want to start? What's the outlook for the use of satellite imagery? Yeah, maybe in a minute, so that we close on.
The outlook is for more data. Demand is increasing. People want higher resolution. They want it more frequently. So right now, we can get TerraSAR X at a 4747 repeat. But there are constellations being proposed where I think in the next 5 years, we'll see a daily repeat. We're waiting to see what the next generation for TerraSAR is going to produce as well. But I think daily repeat will become common, and then sub-daily in the next 10 years. And remember, I had this caveat about critical monitoring. We don't do critical monitoring because we don't collect data frequently enough, but it will catch up with that. Because a ground radar, we're not going to catch up with 5-minute repeat, but it will get somewhere in between in the next 10 years.
All right, Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more repeats, the more resolution that we have, the more ability we'll be able to generate out more insights, to be able to really address kind of that core use case that we talked about, right? So being able to make that loop faster more times throughout the year is going to be critical. So that's really where I see satellite imagery helping drive that and getting that. Getting decision making based on the science instead of just the art that it has been in the past. So more resolution, more frequency.
Brilliant. Alison? Yeah, I would echo the sentiments of John and Kevin that being able to have data now and also the higher resolution. I know we've seen a lot of interest from some of our customers on the upsampled Airbus imagery, the 15 centimeter. And I really think that we're still in kind of like the early stages of folks building up their Earth observation budgets, and that as people see this value and extract that value, I think we can expect that to increase.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jesse, last word to you. What is your outlook?
Same. I mean, I think resolution continues to get better, and the demands become even bigger. And then the revisit. The revisit is something that a lot of applications need. Absolutely. In the case of agriculture, for instance, I can see revisit needed every day. And other applications, not so much. People get in their heads what they think they need. But I encourage everyone to sit back and really consider what you really do need, because obviously all that data comes at a price. So definitely, again, do the smart thing, but resolution, revisit, and then all the amazing things people are going to be able to pull from that data. There's a lot of cool things to come.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I think there's a positive outlook for the future, and yeah, I think it's all about trade-offs, as you said, what to use, what type of data set to use for what application. Sounds good. Thanks everyone for joining in. I think you should all receive the recordings in the next few days, and you have the contact details of all the speakers here. So yeah, thanks for joining, and hope you have a good rest of the day or evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.